Right, hello there everybody, Adam Clery from FourFourTwo, and you see, I was right, I told you, Scotland won, Switzerland won, they can, to an extent, sort of boogie. Alright, just going to get straight into this one because it's obviously very late. Steve Clarke's had a bit of a kicking since the Germany game, but he came into this game, everything to play for, everything to do, and he changed the system, and I think that's worthy of note. So Scotland's entire system, we've talked about it in several videos, I'll link them if you want to go watch them elsewhere, is this sort of 3-4-2-1, 5-4-1, whatever you want to call it. It's basically, the idea is that you stay compact, you stay narrow, and then you have everything congested in the centre of the pitch, you counter-attack at pace, and you score goals that way. Now the problem they had against Germany was that Germany knew what they were going to do and had systems in place to completely dismantle that, but also it just wasn't enough on the ball, it wasn't enough going forward. Even when they were able to get out of defence, they weren't able to land a glove. So going into the Switzerland game, knowing that they had to be more on the front foot, what he did was he made a very sort of subtle change to this. It was still largely the same personnel, minus the suspension for the red card that we won't talk about, but instead of Scott McTominay starting as one of these wide players who then would drift in field, he basically started as a 10 and he split John McGinn and Che Adams into sort of wide forward positions. And if we just straight away look at Scott McTominay's heat map from that match, that is very different to what we normally see from him from Scotland. You can see it's a little bit of everywhere. He's free to drift to the right, he's free to drift to the left, but more importantly, he's free to get in the box. That's what this big red patch is here. And it's not to say that that's a free role. He was still getting back and sort of making up a midfield three here when they were defending, but it did mean that whenever Scotland were going forward, he was always going to be available. And the other major change that he made, the one that had the biggest impact in this game, was, as we said at the end of the last Scotland video, bringing in Billy Gilmour. He is undoubtedly Scotland's best player on the ball. When you are defending deep and you finally get it back, you need somebody who is going to just be able to take that pressure on and make a smart decision, and that's exactly what he does. And exactly what he did. Now this isn't going to look like wildly impressive the first time you see it. This is Billy Gilmour's pass map from the game, right? There's nothing really incisive into the box. It certainly doesn't look anything like Toni Kroos's pass map, for example. But if you just sort of give yourself a second and look at how many of these are in a kind of dangerous area and are short and are forward and are just the kind of level of passing Scotland couldn't even dream of against Germany. And a mere 12 minutes into the game, you saw both of these changes bearing whatever the fruit they make iron brew from is. Billy Gilmour receives the ball just after they've turned it over. He's under pressure. He doesn't panic. He makes a correct, smart, intelligent Billy Gilmour style decision. He rolls it out to Andy Robertson and Scotland are away up the pitch. And from here, this is exactly how Clarke ball? Do people call it Clarke ball? I don't know. It's exactly how Scotland's system is supposed to work. You are deep, you win it back, and then you break up the pitch at pace. And this time, unlike the Germany game, they commit enough bodies forward. They have the bravery required to make the system work. So when they get to the edge of the Swiss box, sounds very delicious, they've got 5 versus 5. Robertson makes the right decision. He rolls McGregor in down the left-hand side, and all the other Scotland players draw all the Swiss defenders towards the 6-yard box, and this is where McTominay pops up. And you know this, you saw them do it in qualifying. They did it twice against Spain of all teams. They create this massive amount of space on the edge of the box, and because McTominay's free to be floating left, floating right, not stuck out on one side, he's actually way more in the left half space, in the left channel, than he would normally be. Now, I personally thought the chance was gone because I was following the ball. I thought he needed to roll it across. I exclaimed loudly that he shouldn't have cut back, but then, of course, who is waiting for the ball? McGregor knows McTominay's going to be there. He rolls it back to him, and yes, admittedly, it does take a fairly major deflection, but you don't shoot, you don't score. In fact, and I am entirely ripping this joke off something I saw on Twitter, Scotland spent the last 12 months trying to get every single Newcastle player with a Scottish granny to play for them, and in the end, it's Fabian Schär who ends up scoring the goal. That's quite funny. Now, if you did watch our videos leading up to the Euros or even just across the season where we talked about this Scotland system, we were quite effusive in our praise for how it can be exactly this kind of effective, how it can open up teams no matter how sort of defensively resolute they are. But the big problem we did say it had was that Scotland play a system where everybody's doing a very specific role and they don't really have the kind of depth to give you confidence about that. And in fact, I think the major takeaway we had in our preview for the Euros was that they are 1 or 2 injuries away from this potentially falling apart at the seams. And then just a couple of minutes later, lo and behold, it's Ralston who is in for one of their major injuries. Aaron Hickey should have been in that position, who just makes a bad decision under no pressure whatsoever, and they get completely punished for it. Now, the mad thing is, normally in games of football, when a player makes a decision like this, you kind of just sort of hold your hands up and you go, oh, well, who's to say what would have happened if they weren't in for the player who was supposed to be playing? But I can say with a lot of confidence, and I'm not trying to dig the lad out here because it is a difficult situation he's in, that Aaron Hickey would not have made that decision. He would have been a lot more composed, a lot more confident on the ball, and they wouldn't have given a goal away like that. And then from there, perhaps inevitably, Switzerland started to get on top. Scotland really had to hold out for the end of the first half. But then something exactly in this vein happened in the second half, which theoretically was bad, but I think we have to say Scotland made just the most perversely bizarre, dirty positive out of. Because when Kieran Tierney gets injured and goes off, Scotland lose undeniably one of their best technical players. Like, I know he's had his critics, I know he's had a bit of a rough year, but this is a player who went to Arsenal, has played in the Champions League, seemed unfazed by moving to La Liga. He is fantastic on the ball. And with all due respect to Scott McKenna, who I thought did fine when he came on, he is not Kieran Tierney. Scotland as a unit without Tierney in are worse on the ball than they were with him. So the reason I mentioned the movie Fight Club is there's a scene right at the start where it's all a little bit chaotic and nobody's really sure what's going on, and Brad Pitt's character, whose name completely escapes me, just says, all right then, I'll fight you for it.
Tyler Durden.
Oh shit, I mean Snatch. And the reason I mention Snatch is because there's a bit fairly near the start where things are all just kind of falling apart. It's a little bit chaotic. And Brad Pitt's character, I forget his name, just sort of says, all right then, I'll fight you for it. And as much as we like to talk about pass maps and percentages and heat stuff and whatnot, all the tactical nerd things on this channel, right? Scotland basically, upon losing Kieran Tierney, just decided to make this match a scrap because they could no longer really expect to beat a team like Switzerland with a ball on the deck. So what they decided to do was beat them with a ball in their face. And this is a diagram I have never once shown on this channel, right? But this is all of Switzerland's incomplete passes. Every time they lost the ball from the moment Kieran Tierney left the pitch, right? And you'll notice they're almost always longer than sort of 5, 10, 20 yards. Scotland rushed them, they got in their faces, they forced them to play longer than they wanted to. Now, they weren't ever doing anything on the ball themselves, but they made sure that Switzerland couldn't either. And yeah, I mean, that is a very risky strategy. Switzerland still got in once or twice. There was a narrow offside. Angus Gunn, who's had a lot of criticism the last week, I thought made some incredible saves, but there was a moment created by all this chaos right at the end, which just, like again, going back to those scenes from Snatch, the moment Andy Robertson heads this ball across goal, time stands still, and you can hear Jason Statham in a Swiss accent saying, now we are f***ed. But I mean, more generally than that, it is just a really good bit of play. It's a second phase from a set piece. You can see everybody moves out, but Andy Robertson is alive to this, and he makes the run in behind into the space that is suddenly created. Like, this is a level of bravery. Like, Robertson should be getting back in here. Switzerland could potentially be on the counter, but it's a level of bravery he displays that gets him into that space. Scotland know he's going to do that. They play him in, and this should, oh God, this should lead to a goal. And this is a very small, non-tactical thing, admittedly, but there was a little replay, which I will try and find, immediately after this. 𝗫𝗏𝗡 Akanji is alive to this danger, and he's the one who stops this being a goal, and he is congratulating himself, he is fist pumping, he is celebrating that block as if he scored the goal. And that tells you that he, at least, if not the rest of the Switzerland team, or indeed the population of the country itself, know that Scotland should have nicked that. This is why we talk about bravery as like an actual sort of game plan that football teams have, because even from the first whistle, you can see Scotland are far less worried about pressing Switzerland in these sort of wider areas of the pitch. All the areas they were really afraid to go at Germany in, they were very happy to do, even from the kickoff in this game. Like you can see here, they've got numbers behind the ball, but they've got them pretty much on the halfway line. One goes here, and the space that creates, another covers over. Then they press out to the touchline, which again, they weren't doing against Germany. They tried to make it as hard for Switzerland as they possibly could. You can see that across the team as well if you look at their average positions across the 90 minutes, because this is such a high line by Scotland's usual standards. The gap between the defenders and Angus Gunn is absolutely massive. That was a major requirement on him. But Andy Robertson in particular is not really playing in that sort of left wing back role. He is getting up to cover that side of the pitch as much as possible to allow John McGinn to try and stay a little bit more central. In fact, if we add Robertson's heat map to this as well, that is very much a team playing on the front foot. Your left wing back does not end up doing so much work in the final third of the pitch unless you are aggressively really trying to get into the opposition. Because this isn't just like passes or crosses or anything like that. It's defensive actions. It's doing everything you can to keep the opposition boxed in. Just to give you a comparison here, and this will seem just incredibly obvious because of the way the game went and the fact they were down to 10 men, but it is a useful illustration. These are all of Scotland's sort of defensive contributions, the successful things they did defensively against Germany. Forgive me, the numbers are upside down here because I've had to rotate the graph because they were the home team and the away team, and just don't worry about it. Anyway, these are everything they did in that Germany game, and you'll see it's almost entirely restricted to their own half. But then we look at all the successful actions against Switzerland, and we see they are still defending their own box really well, but they're not afraid to go and try and win it back in their own third, in the opposition half. Like, it's so much more ambitious, aggressive. It's so much more Scotland. Now, the fact remains they did not get that winning goal. They're still only on 1 point in the group. But I think if he'd laid out their European Championship journey, saying getting beat off Scotland, drawing Switzerland and beating Hungary is probably how most people would have envisaged them getting out of the group. So just mentally subtract the fact that it was an absolute hawking against the Germans, and they are sort of on course for what they wanted to do. Now, can you do that without Kieran Tierney? And can you do that without Aaron Hickey? And can you do that with Hungary looking a lot better than I think a lot of people thought they were? That obviously remains to be seen, but based on tonight, we'll give it a go. Now, of course, you're a clever sort. You won't want to miss the videos looking at that as and when they happen. So this little subscribe button right here, that is your friend. You click on that, you help us grow the channel. But also, more importantly, you don't miss all the excellent Scotland Euros coverage as and when it drops. Until next time, though, you can grab me on all of the socials at Adam Clery, Clery. The 442 socials are in the corner of the video here, and the magazine is in the corner of the frame right here. You can get that from all great retailers now, even the ones in Scotland. Yes, comments. We also really like comments. Are you a Scotland fan? Do you have hope? Do you have despair? Please let us know all thoughts, all feelings, all emotions. They are welcome down below. And until next we meet, my friends, which will be, for you, likely after the Hungary game, I will see you soon. Bye.